Thanks for coming today. I'm Rochelle Diamond. I'm on our employee experience team, and I run our LinkedIn speaker series. Before we get started, I always like to remind everyone what our LinkedIn speaker series is all about. Our goal is to bring inspiring ideas and innovative thinkers to our employees to make them more productive and successful. And who knows where you can watch all the past speakers? Anyone? Go/something. Yeah. Go/speaker series. Or if you're outside of LinkedIn, because we are streaming this externally as well, it's speakers.linkedin.com. And we also launched a channel on iTunes, so you can look up LinkedIn speaker series and download them as podcasts for your commute. So I'm really excited to introduce our wonderful speaker today. I think she is someone that will help us all be more productive and successful by talking about intention and how our thoughts can have such a powerful effect on the quality of our lives. Now, I finished reading her book this past weekend, and it is wonderful. I highly recommend that you read it. Wonderful stories and anecdotes in there, and I think a lot of really accessible ways that we can be more mindful, joyful, and intentional, and live our life, have a higher quality life. And I was so inspired by it, I actually downloaded, she has an app, intent.com, and I put a couple of intentions out there. And it's really interesting how powerful it is, something as simple as that can be. So I encourage you guys to do that and see. I feel very good about my intentions that are out there. I intended this to be a wonderful event today. So what was I going to say? I was going to say that personally, not only am I personally excited for her to come speak to you all today, but I think that it's really wonderful that we're all here together because I think not only can we benefit from this individually, but also collectively as colleagues, as a company, and as a world. So a couple things about Mallika before we bring her up. She's a mom, she's a media entrepreneur, and a published author. As you can see, she's just written the book Living with Intent. And her other books were 100 Promises to My Baby and 100 Questions from My Child. They've been translated and sold in dozens of countries around the world. Her varied background includes launching the Heal the World Foundation in the 1990s with Michael Jackson. She was also a part of the team to initially relaunch MTV in India. And she also created the Chopra Well, which is a premier YouTube channel that she created with her brother Gautam Chopra and her father Deepak Chopra. Her intent is to harness the power of social media to connect people from around the world to improve their lives, their communities, and the planet. Sounds very familiar to what we're doing here at LinkedIn. So I love how aligned we are. And with that, I'd like to welcome up Mallika Chopra.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And before I hand it over to you officially, we do have a tradition here at LinkedIn when new people join our company. Every 2 weeks, we have an all-hands meeting, and a few people come up in front of the entire company, tell us something that is not on their LinkedIn profile, and they demonstrate a special skill or talent. So I wanted to see if you would
I guess
indulge
on the
us.
LinkedIn profile, it doesn't say that I started meditating when I was 9, but I'm a very irregular meditator. And also maybe that the unexpected, I like to have a scotch every once in a while to relax at the end of the day.
Nice, we got some applause in the audience. It's great.
Un-Chopra-esque, right? So.
And do you have a special skill?
I don't know the special skill. I learned how to, I'm a classical Indian dancer by background, and I've performed a lot, and I think I told you I got to perform for people like Elizabeth Taylor and others. So.
Do you want to show us a couple moves?
Not really. That's okay.
Okay, maybe we'll save that till the end.
I heard Jeff forces people, but yeah, no.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, I want to remind everyone that we are streaming this live and that you can tweet about it or share it or like it or comment, all those things. And we've got the Twitter handles of at Mallika Chopra and at intent.com, and then some hashtags, Living with Intent and InSpeaker. So with that, I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Mallika about living with intent.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Thank you
so much. Hi, everyone. Good morning. How is everyone this morning? Good. I emailed Jeff Wiener this morning before coming here. It's really, really special for me to be here, actually. I was telling him I don't remember. It was probably 6 or 7 years ago when I was just thinking about my company and what I wanted to do. A mutual friend of Jeff's and mine, Sarah Ross, said, "You got to come meet Jeff Wiener. He's amazing and he's gets this, etc." So it was before he came here. And it was one of my first meetings, actually, when I was thinking about my website and what I wanted to do. And we sat, and he was so just present. And it was a very meaningful meeting. And we actually were brainstorming what is intent. And I don't think he remembers this, but we were playing around with words. And I always use this now, that intents really represent who we aspire to be as individuals, members of our community, of our families, and citizens of Mother Earth. So this morning when I was reading kind of about the culture of LinkedIn, I was seeing those words, aspire to be, and it was really touching to read that. So I'm obviously a big fan of Jeff's, and it's such an honor to be here so many years later under kind of his umbrella. So thank you all for being here. So I'm going to talk about intention. That's been a part of my life ever since I was a young kid. As you know, I mentioned earlier, and in my bio, my father is the well-known author Deepak Chopra. And with that comes a lot of expectation and sometimes stress, and you know, kind of trying to figure out who you are and what you're supposed to do in this world. But my brother and I, frankly, grew up as normal kids in Boston. My parents were immigrants from India. They came here when my dad was maybe 22 and my mom was 21 with $8. They couldn't afford to have me in the US, so my mother actually, it was cheaper to fly back to India and have me, so I was actually born in India, than to have me here in the US. So they were the typical immigrants. And you know, for me, it's quite an honor to know that my father really represents in many ways the American dream of coming here and finding success through working hard and sharing his ideas. And we grew up, though, in Boston. He was a doctor who worked 24/7, who was quite miserable, smoked, drank a lot, was never at home, and my parents fought a lot. That's kind of what I remember as a young child. And so actually that was kind of our early years. And when I was about 9 years old, my father, unbeknownst to me and my brother, probably had his own midlife crisis point, and he had gone to hear Krishnamurti speak. You know, my father had always been into philosophy, even though he didn't really practice it. And so Krishnamurti had mentioned meditation. So he was walking in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he walked by a TM center, and to say, you know what, I think I need to try something. So he went in and learned how to meditate. And for my father, he had an amazing experience. For the first time in his life, he felt connection to himself. He felt some silence. And being the melodramatic person that my dad is, he went home and he dragged my mom to learn how to meditate. The next day, my brother and I learned how to meditate. The next day, his brother and my entire family, that side learned, and my mom's sister and that family learned. And before you knew it, the entire Indian community of Boston was meditating. So it was like, again, an amazing ripple effect. And I always say, for me, that was the greatest gift I got as a child, because meditation helped me feel more connected to who I was, especially in the chaos of adolescence and so many things in life. And, you know, it was a wonderful gift. It was also a way to feel more connected to my family. Suddenly, my dad was around. He stopped smoking and drinking after his first meditation and has never done it again. But he was around. My parents were happier. Our family was more connected. He'd ask us questions about our lives. Like, suddenly he was a presence there. So we had a very dramatic shift in our family life because of that. My brother and I were the guinea pigs for all of his various experiments. So whether it was memory techniques or hypnotizing me to deal with my addiction to sugar, which I'm still completely addicted to phrases. So one of the things he'd have us do after we meditate was to repeat the following phrase. And to me, this is really about what intention is. It goes, I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience and set the goals I will achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for and receive as I have asked. And then he'd ask us, what do you ask for? So as kids in Boston, we'd ask for tickets to the Celtics, a trip to Hawaii, Atari games, which shows how old I am now. My dad would listen patiently, and then he'd say, okay, well, what about asking for love, hope, inspiration, connection? And so we were taught at a young age to ask for all of these qualities in our life, the qualities that we wanted to see in our life and to experience in our life. And it was a very powerful experience. You know, I always say intents come from our soul. Again, who we aspire to be, as Jeff says. Intents come from our soul. They're very different from goals or New Year's resolutions, which come from our mind and are very task-oriented. Intents really come from that deep place within us where we ask ourselves, who am I and what do I want? What will make me happier? And so intent really became a theme in my life. That being said, my brother and I were totally normal kids in Boston, did what everybody else does. As I say, people think that, we meditate regularly and we go to yoga class and eat vegan and all that kind of stuff. I've been a very irregular meditator. Some years I meditate twice a day. I've gone through years, I'm 43 now, so I've gone through years where I meditate, years where I don't, years where I do it twice a day. And these days, if I can even do it 15 minutes in the day before I go pick up my kids, like that's quite an achievement. I like people to know, and I hate yoga. I can't do downward dog. And that's been a stress in my life because whenever I go to a yoga class, people will kind of look and they'll say, oh, are you a Chopra? And then the whole class, they're like looking at me. And it actually gets me stressed out sometimes. So I stopped going to group classes and now do it sometimes by myself. So, I'm not vegetarian. So we've led quite a normal life. When I graduated from college, I had an amazing experience. First, I helped Michael Jackson launch his foundation. Again, as kids, we were exposed to incredible people. We had amazing, whether it was entertainers or politicians or authors. These people were at our house a lot. But for us, no matter how famous they were, we were always able to see who they were at a deeper level. Because by the nature of what my dad did, people came to him often when they were vulnerable. So, we had a really deep and lovely relationship with a lot of these people. And I helped Michael launch that. We were sitting at dinner and we came up with the idea of the Heal the World Foundation, which we launched at the Super Bowl and was an amazing way to start a career. And I saw the power of music and media. And so I set the intent that my dream job was to work for MTV because it was frankly the coolest job you could have at that time. And so I kind of set the intent and I spent months pursuing this job. I got a job as the assistant to the head of international marketing in New York, which meant that my job was basically faxing all night long and making airline bookings. But it was fine. It was a first step. And within 2 months of being at MTV, MTV decided to launch channels around the world. So this was the early days. So they were going to launch in India. So I was like, hey, I can go to India and launch your channel. My family is totally connected there. I know all this stuff. Frankly, I'd never worked in India. I can't speak Hindi, and my family wasn't connected. But I convinced them that I was the person for the job. So I was the first one, actually, for MTV in India. And I lived in the Taj Hotel in Bombay. I traveled between London and Singapore and New York, and I kind of hosted anyone who was there. And it was this unbelievable learning experience because I did everything from satellite distribution to business development to marketing to creating videos on the streets with No Doubt. It was like, honestly, the dream job. My business card could get me into any club or party. And I met my husband at the first ever rave in New Delhi. So, you know, it was quite a magical time in my life. And, you know, I was kind of living the life. It was amazing. What happened is we had sold our first sponsorship for the channel to a big multinational company. And it was a huge success for us as a company. We had just launched the channel. It was the early days, and we finally kind of sold our first sponsorship package. And so I was in a car going from our fancy business building in our air-conditioned car to our 5-star hotel, the Taj in Bombay. And we were celebrating in the car. We had just had a major success. And as is usual in Bombay, there was a lot of traffic, so we weren't moving too much. And but it was unusual traffic. The car just wouldn't move. For about an hour, we sat in traffic. And so in India, as many of you know, you drive through slums all the time. You see poverty. And in those days in Bombay, they didn't have all the flyovers, so you didn't have to see it anymore. But, you know, we were driving through some slums. And we finally got to the place that obviously was creating the traffic jam, and we saw a group of kids. It must have been 30 to 40 kids in tattered clothes, no shoes, just standing in the road, and they were all mesmerized by a stall on the side of the road, a shack. And as we slowly approached, we saw that these kids were sitting and they were staring at something in the shack. And in the shack was a television. And on it were young American kids grinding to hip-hop music on the beach in Santa Monica, where I live now. And the logo was right there. And everybody in my car began to cheer. This was such a huge success. We had just sold our first sponsorship, and here we were reaching literally every corner of the planet. And for me, that was the power of media originally when I wanted to do this. And while everyone else cheered, my heart stopped. And I just thought, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I doing? You know, I'd grown up in this environment of all these amazing people who are helping the world and manifesting change. And I had the coolest job on the planet, but it wasn't really aligned with my values. And so for me, that really became a first step in thinking about, and I was young, thinking about, you know, what is my intent? What do I want to do? How can I serve? I had grown up always being asked, who am I? What do I want? How can I serve? And I realized this isn't my way of serving. That being said, I honestly had no idea how I could serve. So I decided to kind of transition out of that role. I ended up getting married. And life continues. My husband and I ended up living all over the world. We did our MBAs at Kellogg. We were part of this whole startup scene when all these companies were launching. And in many ways, though, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I started a company about 12 plus years ago called My Potential. It was going to be the ESPN or CNN of the self-help industry, and we raised over $10 million to launch this company. We never had a business plan, but we had everybody you could imagine as part of it. And then the market crashed, and so that company never took off. So I've had so many successes and failures along the way. And what happened is I found myself pregnant, 5 months pregnant on 9/11. So the morning of 9/11, we're sleeping, and the phone rings, and it's my dad on the other end of the phone. And he's sobbing. I can't even understand what he's saying. He's crying so hard. And he had just made an emergency landing in Detroit. And when he landed, he saw the first plane had just crashed, and it was before the second plane had crashed. And my dad was sobbing because the first news was that it was a plane that had left New York for LA. And my brother had just boarded a plane with my dad when they both left at the same time. So my dad thought my brother was on the plane. And it took us about 3 or 4 hours, and then, the second plane crashed, and nobody knew what was going on. And my mother was on a plane from London to New York. So as so many of us, and Rochelle, you had mentioned as well, you lost a friend, that morning was just such a difficult morning, and I think my family had the fear, but then also the relief that my brother wasn't on there. But it really became a time where, for me, as a mom, you know, when you become a mom, there's so much excitement and, you know, thrills of like your life, what's going to come. But suddenly I had so much fear and anxiety, thinking again, what am I doing? I'm bringing a child into this earth. I'm bringing this new soul into this planet. And for the first time in my life, when I was about 30, I started to really ask myself, who am I? What do I want? And how can I serve as a mother? And it's funny because I grew up again in this world of self-help and self-development, but frankly, it was never one of my things. You know, I was too busy doing MTV and other fun stuff. And for the first time, I really thought, okay, I need to know who I am if I want to shape the life of another soul. And so my journey, I had seen growing up, people usually came to my dad because they had been diagnosed with the disease, they were addicted to something, they had gone through a divorce, someone had died. That usually began that journey. So for me, that 9/11 experience really began my personal journey. And that was my first book, 100 Promises to My Baby, followed by 100 Questions from My Child, which were really like, how can I serve as a mother? And the second one started when my daughter asked me, Mommy, what's a bomb? When she was 3 years old. And I realized, my God, as a parent, how do we answer these questions? My cousin had been diagnosed with a brain tumor and became deaf and blind in the process. And so, you know, this journey of self-development isn't always about having positive thoughts and, you know, all the new age stuff. It really comes often from a place of darkness and pain and questioning. And I think it's up to us to really kind of look deep inside ourselves and think about those answers. And again, life continues. So, you know, again, my subtitle of this book is My Somewhat Messy Journey to Purpose, Peace, and Joy, because every journey, I think, is messy. You know, we have good times and then we have bad times. And so I kind of continued. I started intent.com, that conversation with Jeff, but I always, for me, my intent was to kind of serve in the way that felt right to me. So I've always tried to balance this thing of my mommy life with my entrepreneurial life. And for so many of you here who I know are trying to balance personal and professional lives, whether you're married, whether you're single, whether you have kids, not have kids, what I've found is it doesn't really matter. We all, these days, it seems, feel overstretched, that we're doing too much, that, you know, balance has become, you know, a big topic. The fact that meditation and mindfulness now is so popular always fascinates me, because when I was young, my dad was the East Asian witch doctor who sold snake oil when he talked about meditation and yoga and the mind-body connection. So now when you see a yoga studio on every corner, when people are doing classes in their companies, it's wonderful, but it's also kind of amazing to me. But so I teach a lot, meditation, and talk to groups like this. And there was, about 2 years ago, I was speaking in front of an audience like this and talking about meditation and intent and balance and all this stuff. And while I was talking to everyone, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, God, you know, I had that chocolate chip cookie. I'm feeling so, like, sugared. I had my macchiato. I got to go get the dry cleaning before my husband goes to work. We're applying for middle school for my daughter. Like, my whole dialogue was somewhere else while I was talking to everyone, and I was feeling so overwhelmed, bloated, stressed, anxious, etc. And so I decided just to kind of deal with my own issues. I asked everyone to meditate so I could stop talking and get them to meditate. And I really sat there while I was standing in front of everyone and thinking, okay, I've reached a point again in my life where I've kind of lost it. You know, I'm not meditating, my diet's bad, you know, I'm feeling totally stressed and unbalanced, and I got to make some changes. You know, I'm always talking about intent, but frankly, what does it really mean? At the end of the day, I often felt like I was so busy, but I had no idea what I had done all day. And, you know, my life was full of tasks, but really, what was the meaning behind those tasks? So I decided that I was going to really, despite having talking about intent for like 5 or 7 years. I was actually going to really look and see, what does this mean? So I was very blessed I got to be able to work on that and write this book, which is a chronicle of that. And it really began with going to my dad. So I go to my mom for everything. I never talk to my dad about anything. But I kind of was at home, and my mom was cooking for the kids, and my dad was sitting on Twitter, which he does all day long, for any of you who follow him. And so I was like, I went to my dad and I said, I'd love to talk to you. And he kind of looked at me because I never say things like that. And I was like, I'm kind of stressed, and I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I'm not sleeping well, and I have body pain. And I could see my dad looked completely panicked, and looking at my mom, like, what do I do? And then I was like, no, it's okay. It's not like I'm that messed up, but like something's off. And so this journey really began. I could see literally him transition from dad mode to Deepak mode in like a minute. And as soon as he kind of transitioned to Deepak mode, he was like more in control and comfortable. And so we really began with the very basics. We drew a balance wheel, which was based on the work of Dr. Dan Siegel, who's an amazing neuroscientist and really is looking at the integration from a science perspective of all of the mind-body techniques and how our brains develop when we do these things. So he had a mind-body platter. We kind of worked with that, and we came up with a balance wheel. And really began just with the very basics. And I saw that LinkedIn has kind of this 6 pillars of wellness. And we really began with sleep and rest. Was I sleeping enough? Food. I love to eat chocolate chip cookies. Every event I've done in the last 2 weeks, someone shows up with chocolate chip cookies. It's like a theme for me. But like my sugar addiction, looking at movement. Again, I wasn't really exercising regularly. So we began with just those basics. But then we started to look at other things. Professional, money, and was I feeling fulfilled in that? My family, my friends. And then going on to look at intellectual stimulation. I always was someone who loved to read the news and read books. My life now had become too busy to do any of that, but yet I had like an hour or more to stalk friends on Facebook, or do things like that. So suddenly my life had become more like immersed in just kind of bite-sized experiences rather than really delving into novels, which had always fed my soul. We looked at creativity and play. Did I feel like I was laughing anymore? I wasn't. I wasn't really having fun anymore. And then looking at spirituality and sense of purpose. And so that really became the first step. And then I had this opportunity because I grew up with some amazing people who I had never read any of their books. By the way, I'd never read one of my dad's books. Suddenly I started to pick up my dad's books and be like, oh, he actually says some interesting stuff over here. And so I started to really delve into kind of tapping into some amazing people. I spoke to Marianne Williamson and Andrew Weil and Dr. Dan Siegel, who I mentioned before. I went and I spoke to the head of UNICEF, Carol Stern, because I thought, God, if anyone has a purpose in life, it must be Carol Stern, right? She saves children every single day. And the first question I asked Carol was like, what's the most difficult part of your job? Thinking she's going to talk about poverty or, holding a child while she dies. And she's like, it's managing my kids' schedule. If I could just get them out every morning. And I was like, oh my God, she's a mom too. She's also just trying to figure it out. So I had this amazing experience where I went and I spoke to some amazing teachers. I'll share the story of Eckhart Tolle because that was a fun one. Eckhart Tolle was actually here in San Francisco speaking at the Wisdom 2.0 conference, and it had taken me 9 months to figure out how to connect with him. And so I decided to fly up and take advantage while he was here. And I had been told, you'll have 15 minutes to meet him. We'll walk you in, then we'll knock on the door, then you get up. And so again, all this anxiety, I'd woken up at 5:30 to get on the flight, and I was besought by the worst allergies I've ever had in my life. So I was sneezing nonstop, my eyes were teary. And when I got here, I was like, oh God, this will be so embarrassing if I go and I'm just sneezing nonstop while I'm sitting with Eckhart Tolle. But it had taken so long to organize this meeting that I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go and deal with it. And meanwhile, I kept getting texts from my dad, who was like, just remember, he's always in the now. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, that he's always in the now? And like, literally every 10 minutes later, remember, he's always in the now. So I was like, okay. So I get to the hotel, the host takes me up to the room and again, really warns me about the limited time that I had. And of course I had 10 questions. I was really determined to ask each question and get the answers. And so we go up and he opens the door and I immediately feel like, oh my God, it feels like when I used to be with my grandfather. He has such a beautiful presence. And I also noticed my sneezing suddenly stopped and I was kind of calm. So we go in, and the guy's like reminding me, look at the time. So I have my iPhone next to me, and I have my questions, and I start talking to Eckhart about this whole idea of intent. And then these bells start to ring in the background. And he just stops and he says, listen to the bells. And I'm like, no, I have questions to ask. But I wanted to be polite. And so like I see my clock, okay, we're 3 minutes in, I have 12 more minutes, we'll listen to the bells. And like 2 more minutes and we're still listening to the bells, 7 minutes, we're listening to the bells. And then finally I just let go. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna listen to the bells. And we sat there for 15 minutes and we just listened to these beautiful bells. And I was like, now I get what my dad said about him living in the now, because we really just experienced that. Of course, he ended up spending an hour and a half with me, answering all my questions, and we had such an amazing conversation. But it was a lesson to me even, again, early on in this process. And I talked to him a lot about, you know, I grew up in this culture where we were taught that something called dharma, which is your purpose in life, and that we all have a unique purpose in life. And to me, that was very stressful, actually, because I was like, I don't know what my purpose is. Like, you know, again, if I can just get through the day, like, that's a big deal. And he said something like, you know, sometimes you instead of asking, how can I serve, ask, how can the universe serve through me? And I was like, I have no idea. And I said to him, you know, I feel like I'm a soccer mom. That's what I do. Like, and I always feel like maybe it's not enough, and I'm full of guilt that I'm not doing something bigger. And he said something really beautiful, which was, he said, it's the everyday people who are doing extraordinary things to bring up the frequency of our universe. And he called them the frequency holders. And he said, you know, you don't have to be a superhero. You don't have to be out, like, touching millions of people. If you, in your everyday life, can do something that impacts, for you, it's your children or for your community, that's something to be really proud of. And those are the people who are changing the world, the frequency holders. And so it's a very beautiful and reassuring message for me to hear, because I had definitely worn this label of the soccer mom as something that I just wasn't comfortable with. And in the book, that's a theme, and kind of the joyful acceptance of that. So I walked through the book. I came up with an acronym around the letters I-N-T-E-N-T. And the acronym, and it's full of stories and all these meanings, but the acronym really represents my path to intent. And this is something I've thought about for years for my life. And this journey was really tapping into, again, all these amazing lessons I had learned throughout my life but kind of forgot. So I stands for incubate. And for me, incubate really means going back to that place where we remember who we are. I had realized I forgot who I was. Like, I really was so busy all the time, but I didn't really remember who I was and what made me happy. So, and sometimes we don't know that, and sometimes it takes time to know that. So that's why I use the word incubate, because when we have a baby, we incubate a new soul for 9 months. It takes time. Or when we plant a seed, I love the analogy of seeds. When we plant a seed, we put it in the ground, we put the dirt on it, we let the sun and the water nurture it. We don't take it out every day and show the world my seed and my intent. We put it in a place where it has to incubate, and sometimes it takes time for it to blossom into this beautiful flower that we don't even know what it will be. So incubate for me, practically, was returning to my meditation practice and saying it's okay if I don't do it twice a day and follow all the rules. There was an article that came out yesterday, which I love the title. It was like, throw out your rules for meditation, because on my book, because I think we all have different ways to tap into silence and to remember who we are. For me, it's really going back and just being quiet, letting my racing thoughts kind of go in the flow. And I'm going to end this with a short meditation, so we'll do that. But you know, meditation, some people like to go for a run. Others like to go swimming in the beach. Some people find their yoga practice helpful. So we all have different ways that we tap into silence. N, and I'll quickly go through this so we have time to do a meditation. N is for notice. I started to notice that my internal dialogue was, I'm stressed, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed. I was constantly telling myself all this. And once I started to notice my dialogue, I noticed that's the reality I'm creating in my life. When we were kids, my dad, another experiment, he'd make us go through a day of no criticizing, condemning, or complaining. So try to do that for a day and try to do it for an hour, and realize how your perception of your reality changes. Notice is also about noticing the people, the places, the circumstances we come across every day. Every day there are people who can help us on our journey or opportunities, and sometimes we're so busy in our goals and our tasks that we don't even notice what's happening. T is for trust, which is trusting your intuition, trusting yourself. Sometimes when you really need to trust yourself, for me, I'm an ambitious, competitive person, and so I think I always had this thing like I have to do these great things. But when I really started to trust that I'm on the right path doing what I'm doing as a mom and, entrepreneur, I kind of felt more happy and peaceful. E is for express. Express what you want, take ownership of it. And really, that's such an important step, to the extent that my entire company is about expressing your intents. And it's about stating what you want and then letting it go. That's why I love the internet. You can hit enter and it's off into the universe. But once you express what you want, then you find magical things start to happen. People start to support you. Others kind of bring you up. So express for me is very important. N, the next N is for nurture. Nurture is letting go of the guilt, the self-criticism, the constant, I think it's a woman thing. We're always feeling guilty about not being at school, not being at work, not doing this. We're always taking care of other people, but we don't take care of ourselves. That chapter is probably my favorite chapter in the book, because I went back to India to take care of my grandparents who were older. And when I got there, my grandmother had baked for me. She put the blanket on at night. She put the fan on. I had tea with my grandfather. For the first time in 20 years, I was being taken care of, and I forgot how important self-nurture is. And the final T is for take action. One of the things I hate about the self-help movement, which I've grown up, is, it's all about kind of positive, say you want this and it will happen, etc. I don't believe that. I think we have to take action. There is a time for goals. There's a time for really embracing and taking action and responsibility for what we want to create in our life. But we kind of have to do all the other work to be able to do that in a more effortless and easy way. So take action is definitely part of the process. So that's my path to intent. And again, I'm so grateful for you all being here. I always like to end my sessions. What we'll do is I'd like to end with doing a short meditation. And then afterwards, I'm happy to answer questions. Okay? So meditation should be really simple. The goal of meditation is to reduce stress, not create more anxiety because you feel like you can't meditate. And I always like to remind people, the rishis who sat in the Himalayas meditating were not dealing with stress management. They were really experiencing what the universe has to offer. So ultimately, meditation is a spiritual experience, but of course it has all these incredible benefits, which now science is showing us as well. So in this meditation, what I'm going to ask you to do is sit comfortably. Normally, you can sit in any position. You can, even at home, sit in your bed, sit in your most comfortable chair. I recommend not lying down, only because when you lie down, you'll probably fall asleep. But sit comfortably. If you need to adjust during the meditation, adjust, because otherwise you'll be so focused on how uncomfortable you are. So just adjust your position. I'm going to ask you, when we close our eyes, to just repeat the following phrase. I am. I am. And what will happen is you'll repeat the phrase. Don't feel like you have to do it at a particular rhythm or pace. You'll repeat the phrase, and then suddenly your mind will start to wander. You'll start to think about, okay, as soon as I get back to my desk, I gotta do this, I have to go to the bathroom. That's completely normal. And that's what our mind's supposed to do. Our mind wants to wander. You know, we also release stress through thoughts. Sometimes you'll have completely random thoughts. You'll start remembering something when you were 5 years old. And you're like, where the hell did that come from? Like, so, you know, our minds naturally wander. That's totally fine. It's totally normal. All I'll ask you to do is gently come back to the words I am. So it's this natural process between thoughts, I am. Now, the reason I give you I am is it's a vibrational sound. It's the same as Om, Amen, Amma, Mama. These are vibrational sounds. They're sounds that are based on the primordial sounds of nature. The sound of the waves crashing on the beach. The sound of the wind coming through the trees. So these sounds were cognized by rishis thousands of years ago. So I am is a nice kind of sound to just use. For many people, they say, every time I meditate, I fall asleep. Well, you know what? Notice what your body is telling you, which is saying, I'm tired, and it means you need to get more rest. So if every time you try to meditate, you fall asleep, it means you're tired, and you need more rest. There's nothing more complicated. So again, we'll just go through this experience, and then what may happen when we introduce this word I am, what happens is we start to break the cycle of our thoughts. So our mind works that normally we have one thought, which triggers another thought, which triggers another thought, which triggers another thought. By introducing these soothing sounds, we basically start to break that cycle. And what happens is we start to experience more of the space between thoughts. And what is that? That's tapping into our soul, who we really are, because we aren't our thoughts. As you're listening to me, pay attention to the one who's listening. And do you feel a presence? Something different from your thoughts? A presence that may be having the thoughts. It's the one who's having the thoughts is really our soul. So through meditation, we're really trying to tap back into our soul and who we really are. All right, so everyone sit comfortably. And for those who are watching, you can do this at your desks. You can do it wherever you are. In fact, you can do this in the busiest airport. I do it in carpool line all the time. So sit comfortably, close your eyes. And for the next 2 or 3 minutes, I'd like you to just repeat the words, I am. I am. I'll ask you to mentally repeat these words for the next minute or two, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do. Now keep your eyes closed. And you could stop repeating the words, I am. I'm going to ask a few questions. Don't feel the need to answer the questions. Just experience the answers and then let them go. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? What do I want? What do I want? What do I want? How can I serve? How can I serve? How can I serve? Now just spend a few seconds thinking about what you are grateful for. You can take a deep breath, and whenever you are ready, come out of the meditation and gently open your eyes. So thank you again for having me here. I'm very grateful to be here. It feels full circle, actually. So thank you.
So we have 2 mics set up. If you have a question, you can come up to the mic, and then we're also taking them on the stream if you want to type those in. I think we have a question from the stream from Marianne over there.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm just representing the employees that are on our stream today. And one question came in. If you can imagine being over 55 and still not knowing your purpose in life, what would you tell me?
You know, I have gone through so many phases like I outlined in my life where sometimes I feel like I know it, sometimes I don't feel like I know it. And it's created a lot of anxiety for me. So my suggestion is take the time to do so many of these practices that now we have access to. Take the time to try to meditate, go for walks on the beach. Sometimes we're so overwhelmed by all the thoughts and the demands we have from everyone else that we can't even remember what we want and what will make us happy. So I would say first let go of the anxiety and then just try to find some time to be silent. You know, for me, I honestly, that conversation with Eckhart Tolle, I finally, and it's like my last chapter of the book, I was like, you know what? If my purpose is to be a soccer mom, that's awesome. And it was not acceptance, but it was like joyful acceptance. And joyful acceptance that that's great. That's we don't all have to be superheroes, super mom. We don't have to be saving the world. Maybe we just can do it in our little kind of family or community.
Thank you.
Hi, Mallika.
Hi.
Thanks for coming to LinkedIn.
Thank you.
So in your book, you mention a number of activities and exercises that you can undertake to help us get to that point. What are some of the things, maybe 1 or 2 of the things that you use in your own life that might be of benefit?
Absolutely. So, you know, sometimes it's just the simple things. For me, I've had this tool of meditation my whole life, and yet I don't do it, or I'm very irregular about it. So one of the things I really committed to, and again, this is taking action, is I decided, you know what, I'm going to commit to my meditation practice, which for me means I drop, like my morning is crazy. There's no way I'm going to meditate in the morning. Then as I get the kids to school and all that, then I get to work and I start working. And I pick up my kids around 3 or 4. So for me, I set 2 to 3 as a time where I'm going to have my tea. I'm going to meditate. Now, usually I end up, it's like 2:45 to 3 because things get so busy. But I've really made a commitment to doing that. So that's one. Second, noticing really started to play a powerful effect in my life of noticing my internal dialogue. Because I realized I'm just constantly berating myself and feeling guilty and all that. So I really changed my internal dialogue. And I also started to notice my sensitivity to food because I was having a lot of body pain. And I realized once I started meditating, I felt more relaxed. That was better. But also, I had this constant struggle of addiction to sugar and eating all that stuff, and I realized it makes me feel awful. And so it took discipline to actually start shifting some of my diet. But again, you have to take action, but I had to notice really first what made a difference. So those for me, and then I talked about how I hate yoga and did things like exercise, but I realized I'm a social person. In fact, I was talking to Gretchen Rubin, who has this habit book out right now in the Happiness Project. And it was I was so looking forward to talking to her because I thought, okay, we're moms, we're the same age, we both we have similar paths. And I thought, oh, this is going to be the best conversation because I'm going to find my soul sister. When I met her, I realized we're so completely different. Like she has it so together and I have it so not together. But what she told me, and that's her book, is that we're all different types of people. For her, it does the external and internal is very driven, and she realized that once she did the Happiness Project that she was able to create habits. And I was like, I can't do that. And she said, that's because you're someone who's both externally and internally motivated, and that's why you started intent.com, because when you create community, it helps you. So I started a yoga class with my friends. I started a book club because I'd stopped reading, and I was was kind of, my soul was dying because I didn't have that kind of art in my life anymore. So I started doing things in community, which for me and my nature really helped me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Another question from the stream. Do you think that technology has made it more difficult to know ourselves more deeply?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. I'm such a fan of technology. I think these tools, they help us connect. There are amazing apps. I mean, look at what LinkedIn is doing. It's unbelievable. It's helping people. So technology is, though, just a tool. There's nothing good or bad about it. It's how we use it. So I am a big fan of technology. My dad and Oprah started this 21-day meditation, which is using all this technology also. And 3 million people were meditating together on the last meditation challenge. That's pretty amazing, and the ability to connect with people on that level. When I started intent.com, my intent is to be a good mom, but because of technology, I was able to see oh my God, a woman in South Africa or a woman in Beijing or a woman in Delhi has that same intent as I do, and the ability to connect on our deepest desires and aspirations was so powerful. So I'm a believer in it. That being said, we can all, myself included, can use it also as an escape. I have a 13-year-old daughter, so as a mom, technology and all these social media tools obviously create concern, but we really just try to kind of constantly have the conversations and use it for their benefit. The advantage for my daughter is that she has her grandfather following her on everything, so that kind of creates some boundaries.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Does anyone else have anything? Well, speaking of technology, I thought maybe you could take a minute to tell people how intent.com works and a little bit about your app.
Yeah, so, Intent's been such a journey, and my husband's a venture capitalist, and so when I started this company, I was like, okay, I've done the venture capital thing before, and I said, there's no way I want to work with people like that, because I am a mom and I have 2 kids, and I know there's so much conversation around this, and so I decided to really kind of start Intent in a very grassroots way. And so we keep it's a very messy journey also. You know, we started as a blog. I thought, oh, let's start like the Huffington Post for wellness. Ariana had just started Huffington Post, and you know, my dad writes 4 books a year, and by the time a book comes out, like he's written 3 more, and so he's forgotten about those. So at that time, it was like, oh wow, blogging would be great, right? Like he can just keep sharing his thoughts. So it started off as a blog, but we had this little box in there that said, what's your intent? And we saw that people really started sharing their intents. So then we kind of became like the Twitter for a purpose. Like we keep changing. And we thought that, oh, all these people will state their intents. Well, what happened was more people were supporting people's intents than actually stating their intents. So I saw that people sometimes don't know what their intents are. They're shy about it. But if you ask people to support someone, that's something easy. It makes us feel good. So our latest iteration, you know, we have everything going on, but we really just 2 weeks ago. So it's very simple and basic. It's literally brand new. But we created an app where people can kind of share like the visual side of it with their intents. And then there's this global community that's building, that's supporting each other. And I think it's such a wonderful way to connect the world around their deepest desires. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Well, a big round of applause, please, for Mallika.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Like I said, and I want to just thank Jeff again for being such a champion and supporter.
Great. Well, I'm hoping that this resonated with all of you and that you have maybe 1 or 2 things that you can take back to live more intentional, joyful lives. So thanks for coming. And for everyone that is here in the room, Mallika is going to stay to sign your book. So we're going to be bringing our table out here and we can line up and she'll sign the book. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.